Let's spend some time talking about what it costs to actually leave the United States. One of the reasons that people give for wanting out of the US is to find a lower cost of living. And that can be done for sure in a lot of countries. And it was one of our priorities as well. But remember that you have to factor in how much it's going to cost you to get from the United States to your country of choice. Hi, my name is Maureen. Welcome back to the channel. And if you're new, welcome. In 2024, I moved to Bulgaria with my husband, Jeremy, and our two tuxedo cats, Damon and Pythias. And I make videos for expats and wannabe expats so that you can make your own informed decisions. We've had 3 international moves, Jeremy and me. I'm going to leave off Mexico because that was like 12 years ago and it just doesn't seem pertinent at this stage of the game. But more recently, we moved to Ecuador for 18 months. And then in 2024, we moved to Bulgaria. And there are a handful of videos around that talk about what it costs people. But I generally find that those costs are underestimated. And when you really factor in everything that it's going to cost you, it seems that a lot of these other resources leave out some key expenses. So I wanted to actually turn the camera around today, look at my computer and a spreadsheet and look at the expenses that we incurred. Now, some things we incurred that you might not have an expense for. We brought 2 cats with us from the United States, for example. But I have that as a line item. So if it doesn't apply to you, you can just deduct that from the total. Another thing that we had that most people will not have as an expense is lodging while you are waiting for your paperwork for the visa D to be completed. So if you've seen prior videos that I've made, you will know that Jeremy and I came from Ecuador back to the United States to apply for the D visa. And that was a 3-month process. During that time, we rented an Airbnb, we rented a car. So clearly you would not have those costs if you're just living in the US and you stay in the home that you're living in before you actually move to the country that you're going to. So I didn't even include those line items in the overall budget because they grossly inflated the amount and I didn't want to scare people. So I left those out. I did, though, go into the nitty gritty and I included our legal fees, the cost of the visas, the cost of our residency card, including flying to Chicago. To apply for a D visa for Bulgaria, you need to be in your home country and you apply for your visa from the consulate that covers your state. For us, that is Colorado. That's considered our home state. That's where we file taxes and our business is based. The Bulgarian consulate that covers Colorado is located in Chicago. Well, we had to get to Chicago twice. We had to go for an interview, we had to submit our application, and then we had to go back and actually get the visas affixed to our passports. So you either have to go to Chicago or you need to arrange for the documents to be FedExed to you. When it comes to an expense that could be done in an alternative way that's less expensive, I'll let you know that as we go through the numbers. But I do think it's important that you know the totality of what you should expect. And this is only going to talk about Bulgaria. I might make the occasional reference to Ecuador because we've been there, done that. This is mostly going to talk about the fees to get to Bulgaria, and it's going to reflect our situation. For example, we did not ship a container of goods over to Bulgaria. It can be done. I found it not worth the money. We can pretty much obtain anything that we need over here. But there are certain things that we like to have. We have mementos, we have artwork, we have specific kitchen appliances that I have, that I love, that I don't want to replace. So in our case, we did bring extra suitcases on our flight over, and those suitcases run about $200 a piece. You bring 5 of those, you're looking at $1,000 just to get some extra stuff to your new country. Some people would say, just no way, I'm not doing that. for us, the financial trade-off was worth it. So you have to tailor these amounts to fit your particular situation. So let's turn the camera around and dive in and see what it was that we spent and give you a better idea of what it is that you might be spending if you decide to up and leave the United States. Let's look at our actual expenses. I'm going to cut to the chase and give you the total for those of you who don't want to sit through the entire video. It might be a bit of sticker shock, so please stick around and I can dive into our expenses and you can deduct the ones that don't apply to you. But our total fee for what we paid to move over to Bulgaria and set up our household was, where's that drum roll, $24,502. Now, I just heard a bunch of thumps of people hitting the floor. Let's go and analyze some of these expenses because you don't have to spend this much. And quite honestly, we spent considerably more than that because, as I've mentioned, we had to pay for temporary housing in the United States that most people won't have to pay. But because we came back from another country, we didn't have a place to live, so we had to pay for that. But that is not included in that 24,000 total. What is included are these 7 categories: the legal fees, the CAT expenses, the household setup for our first apartment in Plovdiv, the lodging, that's the temporary lodging we had when we first got here and stayed in an Airbnb. I have a miscellaneous category for various things, transportation, and travel to Bulgaria. Okay, let's go into each one of these. Legal fees are going to encompass not just what we paid our attorney, but the legal fees that we paid to the state for our actual residency. I also included things in there such as the cost to FedEx documents to Bulgaria that we had to do from the US. These are costs that you're going to incur that a lot of people just dismiss, but you need to do these things. So this is a much more comprehensive itemization of expenses than you might have seen in other places. The budget encompasses, I think, 13 months. The first fee that we paid was in July of 24, and then the last fee that we paid was in July of 2025, and that was our actual residency fees to get our residency cards. I'm going to be jumping back and forth between this spreadsheet and my checkbook program, which is a program called Clear Checkbook, which I really love. I've been using it for years, and it will allow me to, for instance, click on what I spent in July, and it will itemize what that $600 specifically went for. So we're going to be hopping back and forth. So I happen to know from memory that this was the first deposit that we gave to our attorney, our immigration attorney. So it started in July of 2024, and this was the deposit that we gave to him to get started. And there were other fees, legal fees that we had to account for. We didn't have anything in August. In September, we came back. Well, it was like August 31st. We came back to the United States and our attorney started working for us in earnest. So if we go over to my checkbook program, now you will see that these numbers don't always exactly agree. That is because for the spreadsheet, I removed things that wouldn't apply to the average person. We had extra expenses because of our temporary living arrangement or our travel. I did not include our travel from Ecuador back to the United States. Was that a cost for us to go to Bulgaria ultimately? Sure. But will most people have that? No. So you might not see the exact same numbers here as we go from one to the other. But let's go back to September of 2024 and see what that 456 was for. Two first things we did was send our attorney power of attorney so that he could open bank accounts for us and take care of some other things. Those had to be FedEx. They had to have a wet signature on them. We couldn't just sign them electronically. So the FedEx fee to send things from Colorado to his office in Bulgaria was $137. And then also in that month, we went to Colorado fingerprinting to get our fingerprints taken for our FBI criminal report. So those are fees that we incurred, and that is why we spent $400 in that month of September. Then in October, we had a bigger expense, and I'm thinking that's probably what we had to spend to our attorney. Let's see. Legal fees. Here we go, right here. Okay, so yes, this was money sent to our attorney, and that was for the two of us. And he handled things such as, of course, his own fee, that's a year's worth of insurance premiums for the two of us. He opened bank accounts, which had a serious amount of fees attached to them. Now, the bank account fee is a fee that you might not experience if you're going to another country. I believe the bank account fee to open the bank account, this goes to the bank, not to the attorney. The bank account fee was close to $1,000. Let me think. I guess that was for two of us. And that's to run background checks and make sure we're not laundering money and all that. I don't know if every country has a fee that high, but it was fairly steep just for us to open bank accounts. So that covered that and his legal fees as well as he helped set up a lease. One of the requirements that you need to move to Bulgaria is you either need to own a property or you need to have a 1-year lease on a rental property. He set that up for us. And so that was the fee for that. And then a driver's license for Jeremy. That must have been his international driver's license. That's all. Yes, because we paid that to AAA. That was for him to get his international driver's license, which I consider to be a legal fee that added to the expense of our move. A lot of people don't include this kind of stuff, but we wanted to drive when we got here. And to do that, you have to have an international driver's license. So these $30, $40, $50 fees tend to add up over time. So I wanted to make sure that everything was included there so that you know what you're getting yourself into. And then there's just smaller legal fees as we go along here. I'm not sure what these were for, but we can certainly go find out if we go to, what's this one? Okay, the fee for the two of us at the Bulgarian consulate was $236. That was the fee for the actual Visa D application. Then we had to get visa photos. We went to AAA and got those done. I got my international driver's license the month after Jeremy. And then these are just little incidental fees. I didn't necessarily put in the memo what every fee was. I just wanted to make sure that I put everything in the right category. So I don't really know what these things were for, but they were somehow related to legal fees. And what's not here, because we flew on points, is the fee that it cost us to fly from Denver to Chicago to the consulate. I paid for that with points. So you'd have to, and plus that would be different, obviously, wherever you're coming from, because you may not have to fly at all. Maybe your consulate is right down the street. Ours was not. But that cost is not included here because we used points on Southwest to pay for that. And then there's other small expenses here, $600 in December. That was for our real estate agent. Once we came over to Bulgaria, we stayed at an Airbnb for a month in December, which that cost is itemized elsewhere. This is the $600 kind of the finder's fee, the commission that we paid to our real estate agent. This could have technically gone under lodging, but I put it under legal fees because it could have gone either way. So we paid him $600 to take us around and show us houses. And then when we rented something, it was some sort of a percentage of the first month's rent. So that's what that $600 fee was for. And I mean, and that's the reality, is you have to set up housing when you come here. So people who don't include that are doing a disservice because they are expenses that you will incur. Then the next big one for legal fees was April of 25. And I'm certain that I don't even have to tap into that. I know what that was for. If you've watched my other videos, and I'll put a link to those up top, you'll know that getting residency in Bulgaria is a 2-step process. You have to get your Visa D in the US, and then you have to come here. And about 3 months later, you apply for your actual residency, and that $13.40 was the fee to our attorney to handle that process for us. So that's what that was for. And I don't think we had any. Oh, and then all we had after that, the $700 was the actual fee to Bulgaria, to the immigration office, the government, to pay for our residency. So all totaled, our legal fees came to a little over $7,000. CAT expenses, I'm just going to gloss over very quickly. That involves things like we had to take them to the vet and get them examined. We had to have a USDA health certificate filled out for them. We had to pay for airline fees to fly them over with Lufthansa. I want to say it was maybe $200 a cat. And so those were all fees that were included under cat expenses. I will do a separate video on what it cost us for the cats to get here and what those expenses entailed. But since they don't apply to a lot of people, I'm just going to gloss over it here. Household setup in Plovdiv is something that a lot of people will not include. And it's also something that we spent a lot of money on. So if that total fee scared the bejesus out of you, take a look at this line item, because it's one of the ones that you can really cut back on, particularly if you're a minimalist or you're used to flying light, traveling lightly. Now, on the flip side, if you want to bring a container of household goods over here, then you need to up that amount considerably, because it's going to cost a lot more. We kind of fall in between those two things. Our home base is extremely important to us, and most of the lodging in foreign countries will come as technically furnished. But you need to take that with a huge grain of salt, because furnished doesn't mean it's furnished to your liking. You may go in there and there's a saggy mattress that you want to replace. When we first got to Ecuador, to our furnished home, the living room furniture was so uncomfortable that we could not sit and watch TV. We could not watch a 2-hour movie. It was just so hard on our backs. It was awful. So we went out and bought a new sectional. Those are some of the big things. The quote unquote TV that was left to us in Ecuador looked like it was, I don't know, from the 90s. It just, we chose to replace that. So bear in mind, there are going to be things in your quote unquote furnished setup that are not going to work for you. For us, the furnishings in a kitchen are never sufficient. We can use other people's dishes and their utensils and their mixing bowls. Sometimes I can use their mixing bowls. They've got to be really good ones and not too heavy. That part is adequate, but we like to cook, and I really like my household gadgets. And I did not want to bring over a pasta maker, a bread maker, an Instapot. Things would have just, they don't fit in suitcases, and they're just too expensive to ship over relative to what they're worth. So we did go out, and I don't have to itemize all these expenses. It'll just make the video super long. But you can see that when we got here in December, that is when these household expenses started to be incurred. And they were incurred in December, January, February. Well, that makes sense. That's when we moved into the house. We bought things like blackout curtains to keep the rooms dark while we're asleep. We bought individual heaters. The kitchen in our apartment doesn't have its own, it's not on the main heating system. So we needed a space heater to keep that warm. We bought new bedding. We bought a hutch for the kitchen to store said appliances in. We bought a TV stand because the one that came with our apartment was just low to the ground, and it just wasn't comfortable to watch television. So we invest a lot in our home base. We work from home, we live at home, we entertain at home, we spend a lot of time at home. So for us, investing in those kinds of things was well worth it, which is why you'll see that we spent over $9,000 on setting up the house. You may not spend that much. If you bring a container over, I believe it can cost anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000. So you can pay substantially more. But those are things that we count in our move to Bulgaria expenses because these are things that we really wanted to have to make our home life very comfortable. Oh, we also bought extensive patio furniture. We have a beautiful balcony on our home in Plovdiv, and we want to spend time on it. And it did not come with outdoor patio furniture. We bought our own. So that's where all those expenses came from. The next line item was lodging for the Bulgaria move. Now, that didn't count our lodging in the United States. I took that out because it doesn't apply to the majority of folks. But when we came here, we had to stay in an Airbnb, and I counted that toward our expenses because they are expenses that we had to incur. So you'll see that when I booked that, it was $2,622. Am I right? Am I there? Yeah. No, sorry, my bad. There we go. When I counted that, we paid for that in October, which was $1,647, and then the balance of that was due in December, which was another $600. And I don't think we would have had any more there. No, we did not. So we're looking at another couple of $1,000s for a month of lodging in an Airbnb. We did not, by the way, rent a car for the entire month of December that we were in the Airbnb. We'll get to transportation momentarily, but we did rent a car for the occasional weekend or a couple days to drive around the country as we decided where it was we were going to live, and we went to check out housing. And then there's the ubiquitous miscellaneous, which isn't a whole lot of money. It came to $622. This is the biggest one in November, was $405. Let's go see what that was right here. What did I spend that money on? Okay, a lot of it I did not itemize. Some of it I did. When we got to Chicago, we we paid for lodging. Did we pay? No, I'm sorry, we did not pay for lodging. We went up and back in one day. But we did have to pay an Uber to get around. We had to pay for parking at the airport in Denver to leave our car there. Again, all small things that add up. I bought more packing cubes to pack our luggage in. One tip, totally not the subject of this video, but since I came across this line item, when you're going through customs, if they open your suitcases, having your items and clothing organized into packing cubes makes everything so much easier because you got to put everything back in. And if you don't want customs rifling through your underwear, it's helpful to put those into packing cubes. And we had a bunch of those, but this was a big move. So I bought more and I put that toward the Bulgaria move. The Postal Service, we must have mailed something in for somebody, probably the FBI criminal report. Electrical converters, okay, when you live in the United States, you have one type of plug to plug into the wall. To come to Bulgaria, you had to have a different one. That was a cost of moving to Bulgaria. If you happen to have those or you use the same type of plug in your home country, then you don't need to buy those, but we did. We had to make photocopies for our visa application and buy file folders and envelopes because we needed to organize our stuff. So that is all the miscellaneous stuff that we incurred in that month. And I'm sure any of these other miscellaneous costs are all similar to something like that. And then there was transportation for the Bulgaria move, and that would be probably car rental, January of 2025. I'm sure that was for car rental as well as December. And then the last category was the actual travel to Bulgaria. So that started out with this was the actual fee that we paid for our flights to go from Denver to Sofia. And then what did I spend in November of 2024? Oh, that was for extra luggage. So we did bring extra pieces with us with certain things, as I mentioned earlier, that we wanted to have. Things for my cooking hobby, items that Jeremy uses for his photography hobby. And the other thing is I also bought some food items with me that I knew I was going to have a hard time getting once I got over here. And you want those things to kind of ease your transition into the new country. So I bought tea bags. My favorite tea bag, my favorite tea comes from, of all places, Safeway sells it. And Of course, they have tea in Bulgaria. They have delicious tea in Bulgaria, but I really like my morning cup of chai tea with almond milk. And I didn't want to get here and start looking around for some sort of a reasonable replacement. So those kinds of items are things that we brought over with us. And that pretty much covers everything that we spent. And that is what brought that total to the $24,000. Oh, and then the other thing is we also stocked up on clothing before we came here for a couple of reasons. We didn't know what the shopping situation was going to be when we got here. We had lived in Ecuador for 18 months prior to coming here, so didn't have a lot of winter clothing, but Bulgaria has winters. And Jeremy and I are both very tall. We have freakishly long legs and freakishly long arms and freakishly large feet. And I just didn't want to have to come here and start pounding the pavement to see if we could find clothing and shoes in our size. So we each got new hiking boots, those kinds of things. I did not itemize those as move to Bulgaria expenses because I think ultimately we would have bought those regardless of where we were living, but the shipping of them I did include in the total. So that is what brought this up to $24,502. So there you go. That's what we spent. You can spend more, you can spend less. It just depends on your personal circumstances. At least now you have a baseline so you can see at least what one other couple's expenses were, and you can adjust upwards or downwards from there. If you've made the move out of the US, share your budget down below in the comments or tell us some other expenses you had that I may have neglected or that just didn't apply to us but may apply to you. The more information we put out for folks, the more helpful we can be so that they can make informed decisions. Please remember to like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.